the Constitution says that you have the ability to speak in most circumstances without fear of retribution from the government. Like that is who we are. You know, like your vote is this. You have the right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure. Like on and on and on. Like in addition to democracy, it's not just democracy that's on the ballot. It's the Constitution that's on the ballot.
All right, welcome to Good Guys Getting Better. I'm a virus-riddled Christian Hanley.
Boat Runner.
And I'm a recently virus-free John Borden.
That's right. Yeah, the kids, man, getting everybody sick.
Like, look, we should have all learned from COVID that going unmasked to a party where the birthday child is 4 years old is not a good idea. Turning 4.
Well, did I tell you what happened? Did I tell you what happened at the museum?
No. Oh, actually, you did.
Yeah, I told you offline. Yeah. I'll tell everybody now. So, taking my son to the museum, waiting in line, because it's, even though COVID's passed, there's the whole, staggered entrance thing, so it's not too crowded all at once. And right there in line, dude behind my left shoulder coughs down my shoulder onto me. Then get into security, woman hacks in my face. And then we get through security, and everybody around us is coughing. And I'm like, from now on, like train stations, airports, museums, any big places, I don't know. I don't want to be paranoid, but like, this is how I got sick coming back from a work trip, flying next to somebody who was sick. I'm tired of it. I'm getting so many of these like respiratory and, head colds and other stuff and COVID.
Well, I am kicking myself because at this point it should be just standard protocol. Like I've got work travel tomorrow, and I have planned to be as sanitary and safe as possible. I'm going to assume that everyone has COVID, if need be. Like, look, I don't know if you guys do it. Sometimes it's worth the extra $30 or whatever to go to a lounge and just be around less people. Like you can call it bougie or stuck up or whatever, but I'd rather pay $30 and not be miserable for days than to be like, I'm gonna stand on business and I'm not paying to be around less people. Just do it.
Well,
just do it.
I don't like people, so my natural posture is to avoid people. Like the social distancing, that was hilarious to me. It was like 6 feet. That's standard. Right? Don't come. Hey, all right.
I had lunch with someone this week, and latter half of this week, and very, very lovely person, very, very close talker. And at first, we were walking and talking, and at first I was like, oh, maybe this person lost their balance a bit, and then it just kept happening. And I had told this person I just got finished being sick, and it didn't matter. And I was like, look, this is on you then. Look, I appreciate the conversation. This is actually great. But for your own safety and health, back up.
This is sounding very, very Curb Your Enthusiasm, very Larry David, very Seinfeld right now. He's a close talker. He's a close talker.
Exactly. Those are some of my favorite Larry David's. His comedy is hilarious to me.
All right, guys. Well,
I love talking too. It's a bad thing. Like I don't mind it, but at some point it's just like, okay, our elbows have touched too much.
Oh goodness! All right. Well, unfortunately, we got some real news to get to. So we were chatting offline, and we're looking over some of the headlines, and it's like a crazy split screen right now with Biden. I mean, last night I was texting you both, and I had just heard, an hour and a half prior. In the past month, domestically, we have 353,000 new jobs reported in the U.S. At the same time, what's been called the war in Gaza has just been escalating and spreading across the region. There was the attack on Tower 22, the U.S. outpost, where several service members were killed and many more, a couple dozen more were injured. And then now last night, which would have been Friday night this past week, we had all the U.S. strikes in Iraq and Syria that are allegedly strategic and surgical and all the right words, but could be seen as sort of a tit for tat kind of expansion of this war in the Middle East. So wanted to get you guys' take on that. I mean, we've been talking a lot about how Biden's posture in and around Gaza has been problematic here at home, but now it seems like a total split screen. On the one hand, this guy is just killing it in terms of domestic policy and completely messing up on foreign policy in a way that hurts him both with the progressive wing of Democrats and also, frankly, helps Republicans who are opposed to, especially Trump's base, opposed to further U.S. Hostilities overseas.
Well, I mean, I've offered my thoughts on it, and as you said, the domestic policy was as we were warming up, if you will, before this conversation.
We don't warm up. We come in hot. We come in blazing hot.
Right, you're right. We come in hot. Right. But So it's basically what's expected, right? He's a steady hand. He understands domestic policy. He's been doing it for a lifetime. All he had to really do was unwind the foolishness of the previous 4 years, and I think he was able to do that for the most part because of how foolish what happened over the last few years and how impermanent it was. So he was able to undo a lot of that, and so this was an expectation of anybody who was sound in their judgment. The foreign policy element, and this is what always is a kicker for me, is that you have situations that decades, generations of bad foreign policy have created, and you can't just undo them overnight. You can't do them over a decade, frankly. The problem is that we have to begin with a process that we've never really, we're not having a real serious conversation about, but we have to begin unwinding those policies that have existed for a generation that we've been executing in those regions of the country in order to really change to use a term from 20 years ago, the hearts and minds of the people of that region, so that they understand, so that first of all, we're acting in good faith, and two, that they understand that we're acting in good faith, and then begin to build relationships that have been broken for a long time. With the inability to do that, because that requires legislation, that requires some real thorough conversation throughout our entire electorate, we haven't really had that serious conversation. So all we're doing is just continuing to tinker around the edges, so to speak. We're just trying to manage what we've been left with, and that's the result of that we have, is that no one person has the legislative or the political capital to make real change in that region from our perspective. So we just keep messing with it and trying to manage it, and it's never going to be successful until we stop, hold up, let's change how we're looking at this and really make some real inroads in relationships there. That's my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not surprising. Like what Biden is doing with the economy, I don't want to reduce it to something simple, but I'm not shocked. I mean, this is kind of what you expect. The foreign policy, as we've talked about quite a bit, like that's what's distressing to me, right? Like it seems to me like, as I've said before on the pod, that he's attached to a worldview and a moral universe that the sands have shifted underneath, right? So
good way of putting it. Yeah.
I mean, like Ukraine, like you're on the right side of Ukraine. Like it's obvious, like they are being victimized by someone that has no real reason other than it seems like they have decided that this is what they feel like doing. There are a lot of people that have made the same parallel with the Israeli government. And I want to keep making the distinction between the Israeli government and the Israeli people, right? Like this is a government that has a very clear agenda, and they are exercising that agenda. And Joe Biden looks like he is co-signing on that agenda. And that's problematic for him politically here. And it's going to be really hard to have that balance between the domestic front being so positive, whether it's jobs, whether it's economy, whether it's the Fed this week deciding that they weren't going to raise interest rates yet again. They're looking to cut at some point in the future. Like from a domestic policy perspective, everything is trending in the direction that you want.
Well, say that again. What?
Everything is moving in the direction that you want.
Oh,
right now, his biggest issue, and like there's a lot of reporting back in October, or at least a lot of analysis, that his issue is going to be, is he going to get dragged into a multi-front war? It appears that's what's happening. So rather than, taking a stance, and a clear and consistent moral stance, quite frankly, you can say whatever you want about politics, but to your average voter, I think that is where it's easy enough for you to make a complicated decision. Does this comport with the way that I see the world? And because his worldview is inconsistent, and now he appears to be getting dragged into another multi-country, multi-front war, perhaps. How do you explain it now? It's so much more complicated today than it was yesterday. So I think he and his team have a lot of thinking to do about, forget just how we explain this. How do we do this? I do think that the electorate, especially the younger electorate, they are attached to words, but they're also attached to actions too. And they are more empowered with their vote, in that they expect that when they speak with their vote, that what they speak is going to happen. You can say what you want about, millennial. I am a, geriatric millennial, I guess, and Gen Z being entitled and acting entitled and spoiled. But one thing is for sure, they are more confident and have more agency when it comes to exercising their vote. And I think everyone should take it seriously.
Elaborate on that a little bit. I want to make sure I understand that point. You said they're more competent or confident. I may have missed the word. Confident with their vote. But I thought that's what you said, I guess. But to me, I'm thinking, when you said that, I immediately popped into my head. I'm like, okay, is that a good thing?
Here's what I will say. There might be. There might be. But think about it this way. When I first voted, the internet was still relatively new. Right? Like, it existed. There was tons of information sharing, but it wasn't the wellspring of all human information, the history of human information that it is now. Right? So between 2000 and 2024, the amount of information that is in your pocket at all times, I don't know the math to describe how much it's grown, but this is the only world that they know. They can
anecdotally, the thing that I've heard is that humans have created as much data. So whether it's written, video, audio, whatever, as much of that in the past 15 or 20 years as we had from the dawn of writing up until about 2003 or 4.
Yeah, I think I've heard that as well. Yes, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And the other important thing too that you just said, John, not to interrupt, but I think we have to underline what you're saying before you continue, is that phrase, in your pocket. When we were, first time voters, it was not the same thing. You were not getting videos from halfway across the world within seconds in your pocket. You could have caught something on the news later, or you could have seen a video clip eventually that somebody uploaded painstakingly to the internet, but you weren't getting things immediately on social media in your phone.
Yeah. There are people that are listening, that are going to listen to this podcast, or that are listening to it right now, just because of a hashtag.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that didn't exist in 2000. But that didn't exist in 1991. Like it was the internet was something that was literally a closed network.
So I'm accepting your premise entirely. I think it makes a lot of sense. I guess for me though, I'm interested in sort of diving into what all that means, right? And I immediately jump to, this is a bad thing. I mean, not inherently, but because of what it's created. We've created monsters out of ourselves, right? What we've done, we've created a bunch of people who think we know everything, or at least can get access to everything we need to know at the drop of a hat, or at the swipe of a phone. And that's not, information is not the sum total of knowledge, right? Information is just where it starts, right? And then understanding all of the information you have, being able to analyze it and process it and inform it into useful opinions and actions is an entirely different process that I don't think we're learning anymore, right? We're struggling with that part, and we lack now the humility to understand that we don't get that. So we're all of us 300 million monsters running around here with all this information and no analytical skills. Like that's
right. It's information. It's not knowledge. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I mean, like, look, if you want to really go back, I mean, Plato talked about this, over 2,000 years ago. Like knowing something is a process, right? When you are first introduced to information, you don't know it. It is just something that you have been given.
Sure.
But to totally know it requires an intimacy. Like, his language is something to the effect like it becomes a part of you, right? That's not what we're having. We are closer to sophists than we are to knowledgeable people, if I were to continue with the analogy, right? So I agree with you, Lee, but also that goes back to what we were talking about offline. That's leadership, right? So now that we have this information, what are we going to do with it? Like, if we talk about infrastructure, are we going to build better trains? Are we going to build a smarter electric grid? Are we going to find different ways to build the next generation of citizens? Like that is not the conversation we're having. Society at times feels like it is about I'm one piece of information more current than you, not even better. Just one piece of information more current than you.
No, and I mean, these are all reasonable critiques, and I totally agree with everything you said so far, John. My concern, though, is I think that it gets us into another iffy territory where, you have whether it's the Biden administration or, frankly, less so the Biden administration and much more different commentators and groups and spokespersons who are attacking young and first-time voters, saying that all they know from TikTok. Okay, well, we can get into an academic debate after the fact about knowledge versus, knowing a fact or whether or not someone can actually develop an informed opinion if all they're doing is reacting to the latest news. That's fine. But at the end of the day, someone who is 18 years old and got their information or misinformation or whatever the hell it is from their smartphone, their vote counts as much as an 80-year-old who's lived that many more years and who got their information and knowledge from a combination of television, radio, and paper books. I mean, it's a wonderful conversation to have, but from a political standpoint, from the reality of it, we have to meet people where they're at. And in the case of young voters and the peril that the Biden administration is in, there's no way you're going to persuade anyone by saying to them, especially young people, hey, I love your enthusiasm, but let me pat you on the head here. You're wrong because your information source is crap. Mine is better. That's not persuasive. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you at all. What I'm saying from a messaging perspective, to tie it all back, is that's exactly what he has to do. His messaging has to be multi-tiered, but there has to be, I think, again, a clear, what do you stand for? Like, and it can't just be the economy.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, that can't be it. It has to be more than that.
Yeah.
And right now, all of the news, the good news that I hear, and I think it's a good thing, is about the economy, and I think that's great. The price of groceries is at least holding.
I'm going to challenge that notion, though, for a second. I think what you stand for is not necessarily going to resonate with enough people that it makes the difference. I don't know that for example, Trump doesn't really stand for anything. He just has a bunch
100% he does.
Huh?
100% he does.
No, but his platform is a bunch of grievances. It's not standing for
No, I disagree.
Well,
his platform, his position is "Make America Great Again," and you fill in the blank.
That's a slogan, though, John. It's not really a position.
But
works.
It doesn't.
Agreed.
But it works.
No, that's my point. Is that it's nebulous, though. It's not really
right.
Something.
Exactly.
So that's my point. Is that when you say stand for something, I'm thinking substantive, right? I'm thinking that it was like I peace on earth,
we're years past substance, man. I mean, if you want to get substance, you have to find a vehicle through which to deliver it. I mean, we're past that.
And that's the problem. That's what I'm saying. That's the problem, is that you don't need substance. And so again, so when he say stand for something, I'm thinking substance, and maybe that's not what he meant. But the point is that you don't have to stand for anything substantive. You just have to stand for something that makes you popular, whatever it may be. If you could say, I feel like potatoes should be on every table every night, and that resonates with 51% of the electorate, there you go. That's good enough. You know, it's nonsensical, but it's what gets people to vote. So the question becomes, what is it that people want to hear from him? That's really the question. It doesn't matter what he's doing.
But I'm not in a position to answer that. What I'm saying is he needs something.
Yeah.
If I were to put that back on you, what is his worldview? What does he stand for?
I mean, but thus far, what made a lot of people, myself included, very nervous in the last election was he ran on democracy. And I thought at the time that was way too nebulous, to use your word. I thought that was very dangerous. I thought that for a lot of people who are not wrapped up in the day-to-day of Washington, who are middle class or working class, who are, you know, trying to live their lives, and that occupies all of their time and headspace, that was a huge gamble, but it paid off. And enough people did hear that message, and you know, he prevailed. The concern I have, though, is when we get back to what's going on right now, is that we can't compare the coalition that will reelect Biden with Trump supporters. They're not two sides of the same coin at all. One is far more homogenous and will jump for something as nebulous and as void as or vacuous as something like Make America Great Again. Biden has to balance a gajillion different interests. Exactly. And, you know, you talk about, you always hear about like the progressive versus moderates. It's more than that. I mean, you've got a president who is expected by a lot of the establishment of his own party to back Israel wholeheartedly, to bring it full circle. And then at the same time, I share with you both that Washington Post article out of Michigan, where Biden won his last election by, what was it, about 150,000 votes all in for all of that state's electoral votes. And you now have a coalition of people building up there of Arab and Muslim Americans who are trying to not reelect Trump, but not reelect Joe Biden because of what's going on in Gaza. In a two-party system, again, we can't be condescending, but I'm like, come on. But I mean, in that same piece, though, out of 150,000 votes that got him Michigan's electoral votes, 30,000 of those came from Dearborn, which is the heart of those communities in that state.
Sure.
So if those votes are lost, and then you factor out for everybody else in that state who might not vote Biden again, whether for those issues or completely unrelated issues, it's not a big leap from there to another 110,000.
Yeah.
Or 120.
I mean, like my only thought on that is like, what do you expect them to do? You know, like if they're watching helpless from you pick your town or city in Michigan, and they are watching what seems to be an apathy towards their emotional suffering and the physical suffering and death of the people that are like them, and in many cases their family. How can you expect them to then want to vote for Joe Biden? This is where I go back, Aleem, if you just give me a second. This is where I go back to what I said, you know, last time we were together. He has to do something. Like he has to. It has to start with a narrative, but it is cutting so deep that it is generating apathy, or it's generating like we have to vote for someone else. Like we're going to exercise our vote. We don't want to lose it, but you're going to effectively lose it if it's not a vote for Joe Biden. And that is an awful position for people to be in. And I think Joe Biden needs to at least start with the gesture, saying like, look, I think I've put everyone in a tough position. And I'm not a political strategist, right? So I get the freedom of saying what I want, but he's got to reconcile that he's put people in an impossible position.
So here's the thing. You asked the question, what do you do? So now, you know, as an engineer, I have the benefit of thinking clinically about some of this stuff and say, well, you do a risk analysis, right? You look at cost and benefit. But in a real sense, that's really what you have to do. First step, you say, okay, well, what is the effect of us not voting for Biden and Biden losing? And then you have to examine the alternative and what the alternative is saying and how they feel about those people who you're caring so much, who we all care so much about. And what would happen to them if the opposition gets in? That should be the first trigger right there. Then you say, okay, well, what other than not voting for Biden can we do? Then it requires you to examine what the American political system is built, how it's built. And then you say, okay, well, we third step, we have to form a coalition that has a voice, that so we can actually mold policy in the party that actually has some leanings towards what we're looking for, what we're trying to accomplish. And then you form that coalition, you lobby, you work within the system that exists. You don't just throw it out the window and then screw those people even more by putting someone in office who really could care less if they lived or died. That's really what we're dealing with. So
right, but I mean, like, and not to cut you off here, but like, I hear what you're saying, but for one thing, most people aren't engineers. Their politics don't come down to that sort of rational thinking. And as much as I kind of had my moment a second ago about, it's a two-party system, what do you want? Ultimately, John is correct.
Mm-hmm.
If these people are in Michigan are seeing people who are cousins, I mean, the article that I share with you both in the Washington Post, you're talking about the first person interviewed in that article. He's seeing familiar names, people he might have known on the list of dead in the first paragraph, and says, like, I couldn't read it. It took me a week to read through the list of people who were killed, confirmed killed. If that's your reality, and you're seeing things like that, and it, there are people on both sides who have been killed and grievously injured, certainly. Mm-hmm. But let's be very clear: the way that their lives are evaluated in national and international media, they're not treated equally. And you're feeling like, okay, what's left, our very lives themselves don't matter as much as other human beings. Our lives just are throwaways. Like, at that point, how are you expecting someone to make that sort of a clinical choice? I'm not sure that's a reasonable expectation.
Well, I mean, when I guess you have to consider the alternatives in some way, shape, or form. It's like you understand where the blame has to be placed, right?
Yeah.
And it's not simply on the president that's in office. That's not where all the blame is placed, because there are certain things that person can and cannot do. There's certain things that another person in their position can and cannot do. So you have to understand that first, and then say, okay, well, what is the most effective course of action? There is no scenario by which there is a success path that says, okay, saving these people, helping these people that are suffering starts with getting rid of Joe Biden. That doesn't jive with history. That doesn't jive with the facts that we know. There's nobody, unless there is another candidate that you're voting for that has any reasonable opportunity or chance of winning, that says we're going to immediately stop this killing. Then that doesn't make any sense. You have to vote for someone. So you have to choose. Someone has to be selected. So it's a matter of which person that you're most comfortable is going to serve the purpose that you're looking to serve.
But look, I don't disagree with you at all in any of that. I'm simply saying that the methodology, I just can't expect people to actually employ. I totally get your point about you have to pick, and it's a binary choice. I totally respect that and agree with it. But I do think that the underlying emotional issue that John first brought up is real, and we have to acknowledge that.
Sure.
Look, I was listening to NPR on a Saturday morning on the eve of the 2016 election, and this was in a period of time.
Was that with your cappuccino, or is that before, or is that?
I was on my way to work, actually. It was Saturday morning. I was on my way to work.
I had to get the dig in. You dropped and you name checked NPR. I had to, come on.
But I have to say, in all seriousness, this was one of the most illuminating and thought-provoking pieces. I think it was, I'm going to say her name wrong, but it was like, I forget. At any rate, the article,
beautiful name,
and this is during the yeah, I know, I forget. I'll have to look it up. But at any rate, this was in that time. This was probably shortly after the Access Hollywood tape, and everyone was just kind of feeling like, look, Donald Trump was just stumbling to an epic loss. And there was this air of complacency. And this interview, the conclusion was basically like, you shouldn't take for granted why people feel the way that they feel about this country right now. What they aren't saying is that they feel many of the people that were supporting Donald Trump at the time, they feel like they are being left out. And they feel, for one reason or the other, like it could be that they don't have the education. It could be that the economy doesn't favor them. It could be that there is a greater influx of people that look different or speak different or sound different. And you can't ignore the fact and dismiss the fact that this is how people feel. And it would be unwise to not make gestures to say, hey, I see how the economy is leaving you behind. I see how education is too expensive. Healthcare is too expensive. I see why you pick the number of things that impact the daily lives of Americans that don't have the ability to think as clinically as you do, Aleem. And I think Joe Biden's message is one that worked for a long time, but I don't think it resonates now. Like, it's a very blue collar, I'm one of you, let's rub elbows message, but it's cloaked in so much history. And and it's great again that he got the nod from the UAW. Like, I think that's great. But, like when he says, I'm a blue collar guy, or whatever platitudes he uses to give a signal to blue collar America, it just doesn't hit the same, because I think things have changed. And I think, and that's before you even get to the politics, right? Like Barack Obama, he said, I want to start to ease this economic gorilla that everyone walks around with healthcare. Like, that should be something, no pun intended, but that should be something that's universally agreed. Like, that's something we should do. And obviously he still was able to accomplish it. He was still able to pass it. It was more impactful than perhaps we will ever realize. But it was still politicized. And I think Joe Biden, the challenge for him and for Kamala Harris, who we talked about last time, is, okay, how do you then humanize this? How do you take it down from here to here and make it in a way that you're not just saying stuff to sound folksy and relatable, but that you're saying, I hear you. And the same applies, I think, when you go to Michigan. Like, I put you guys, like, at some point, this is just me, and I know American presidents don't do this, you could ask for forgiveness. Like, I think at some point you have to have some sort of reconciliation. I heard someone once say that one of the things that helped propel South Africa forward was reconciliation, truth and reconciliation. Like, this is what happened, and we need to be reconciled. And I don't know when the right time for that is, and I quite frankly don't know if it's something that Joe Biden will do. But I think the moment that he embraces some sort of reconciliation, some sort of formal request for forgiveness, it changes things. And they're layups. He just made Juneteenth a holiday. But did he? I could be mistaken, but did you ask for an apology to the descendants of the enslaved people? You see,
I think Clinton did that, actually.
A formal apology.
Yeah,
I think Clinton did do that.
Yeah, just a point of reference. I'm just trying to remember. Yeah, I think he did that.
And good.
I'm actually happy. I think so.
That wasn't a big deal to me, because I'm not big on apologies. Like they need to apologize for. People often do that because it's like, that doesn't solve the problem. Apologies don't solve the problem. It takes action. But anyway, I get it.
But reconciliation, in my mind, like, one, that's just how I roll in general. Like, I do think when you do something wrong, you need to ask for forgiveness. I think that's a healthy habit to have.
Of course.
But two, when it comes from the office of the president, that's something totally different, because then you can have action. Like, if Joe Biden can, with the swipe of a pen, start to erase student loan debt, imagine the other things that he can do. Yeah. Right. And like, this is where that moral worldview that I think he needs to start drawing from needs to come clear, because right now it doesn't seem like it's hidden.
Yeah, no. So all of what you're saying, I don't disagree with that. I guess I'm struggling with how to appease everyone who he needs to vote for him, and what message would resonate with everyone. But I think, and I think, as I say that, I think I'm coming to some sort of type of solution, is that just expressing true understanding and specific compassion. That might be that. Yeah. Obviously, that's a start. I think that's the truth and reconciliation piece that you're talking about, John. Is that you have to acknowledge the struggles that each of these groups of people are enduring, who are aggrieved, right? And I think I think Joe Biden tries to do that. He's a little bit clumsy in that process at times, but I think that's purely a generational thing and age in general. So it doesn't resonate. But I think a large part of why it doesn't resonate is because the opposition always diminishes it, right? They'll come and say, "Oh well, you know," there's a counterpoint, there's a counter argument that tosses it, that places it. It doesn't just stand out there in a statement or a campaign speech where he addresses concerns. Doesn't just stand out there by itself. It always, just like the State of the Union, is always followed up by the opposition having something.
The sacrificial,
So it's like, okay, well, so that always makes it challenging. But I think ultimately, and maybe I have more confidence in how effective the written word can be. But I think if we just maybe write more effectively these types of statements and these types of conversations, maybe they'll resonate better with people. Because a lot of times, this is a side micro issue, but I'm disappointed in the prepared statements that we make as in our executive branch of government and in the legislative branch. It's that sometimes they just don't hit hard. They don't go well. You know, Obama,
it's sanitized.
Was that?
It's sanitized.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other problem of having to appeal to so many different constituencies, right? Is that you do have to balance things to the point of maybe just being milk toast. But I think that, you know, when we're talking about, so let's kind of break it into different sections here, different areas. Like with the economy, he needs to be shouting that from the rooftops, and maybe not him, but maybe surrogates. That needs to be very clear, because right now there are still people going on Fox News, going on YouTube, going on all these different digital outlets saying that, well, things were just vaguely, generally better under Trump. And I'm like, okay, 353,000 new jobs in 1 month, no toilet paper on the shelves. We cannot be having this debate anymore. Like that needs to be pounded every single day, just made incredibly clear. In terms, though, of balancing the interests of the many different constituencies around foreign policy, you're talking about young voters who are very concerned about Palestinians and human rights. You're talking about a lot of Jewish Americans who are very concerned about anti-Semitism and about what happened on October 7th in Israel. It seems almost impossible to thread that needle. I don't think it is. I think it's very clear, and I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's difficult, but it's not complicated. Two different things. I think in that case, you're talking about having to be a lot more public. And I know we talked about this a week or two ago. Be a lot more public with the frustration around Netanyahu's government. I mean, he's been in and out of power for decades now, moving that country farther and farther to the right. He's now got a coalition government filled with these right-wing nut jobs in Tel Aviv. I mean, enough is enough. It is entirely possible to be on the side of de-escalating violence, on the side of human rights, on the side of coming to an agreement, a peace agreement, and saying, look, we stand together against anti-Semitism. We stand together for human rights. We stand together for human life and for peace. This guy's an asshole. He needs to back down. Whatever it is, I mean, it can be calibrated in a million different ways. And I know I'm speaking in very broad strokes here, but I think that there needs to be some daylight between the U.S. administration and the current government in Israel. There just needs to be. It needs to be clear that while we support democracy and we support human rights, that doesn't give this one guy and the horrible people he's chosen to surround himself with, it doesn't give them a blank check.
No.
I think that'd go a very long way to make that clear.
And now's the time, because they've showed how bad they managed that blank check. So now would be the time to jump right in and say, okay, let's put a little space between us now. But I don't know how effectively he's tried. I mean, Biden's trying to make statements and do that. It's just, it's not. I don't know. It's not enough. But
I don't think I have a radical idea. I'm just going to completely just throw something at the wall here. I think you should have a podcast. Right?
Oh, Biden.
No, seriously.
I agree.
Here's why.
I agree. Yeah.
Here's why. Like, it doesn't have to be videoed. You know, it can be whatever, but you know, he sits down, he has someone, you know, once a week, once a month, just interview him. You know, just ask him questions, and like he can edit it all he wants. I think Biden's strength is actually what comes from his heart. I think his challenge is that, you know, what is, you know, his prepared marks. Like he's got to summon a different kind of energy to give those prepared remarks in a way that makes sense. And at that point, you're relying on speechwriters. And shout out to all the speechwriters because they have an impossible job because they got to speak with somebody else's voice.
Yeah, it's tough.
I know it is some. Yeah,
I wonder
people
what
write
that's
stuff for me. I mean, you know it, and like I know it because you know, at the risk of sounding immodest, people write stuff for me all the time to share, to read. Like, it is challenging, and it's challenging because I have to edit it too. But I think he should have a podcast. And what Donald Trump did, you know, if I could channel my inner Aleem and be an engineer, the brass tacks is that he found a way to speak directly to the American people without filters. Now, what came out is not something that I think was helpful, right? But it was unfiltered. It was unvarnished. And that resonated with people. I think I'd much rather want to hear what Joe Biden has to say from his heart, even if it's once a month. You know, like, hey, like, I know you got all this, and I know that he's got where it's not an apples to apples comparison, because I don't think Donald Trump has the same basket of information that Joe Biden has. Like, I can't see a world where the information that he received to make decisions was just in the same volume or content. I just don't think he could handle it based on all the reporting that has come out from that White House. It is not what he wanted. Like, he wanted the most easy to digest snippet. And from that, he would just kind of run with it. But actually making decisions, it didn't seem like he had the capacity to do that. I think Joe Biden, in a much different way, in the same way that his Democratic predecessors have done, you know, it's like, okay, I've got a responsibility to make good decisions. I need all the best people giving me all the best information. I need all the best resources so I can make ultimately the best decisions. And I think the weight of that, it hits a little bit different. That aside, I'd still love to just once a month. So I like, let's just sit down, and I'm sorry, just let me just put Aleem, just sorry to cut you off, but it's not like it's a radical idea. Who was it that had the fireside chats at Camp David?
FDR fireside chats. Yeah.
Right. You know, so like this is not a novel idea, and it was really effective. Like, it's what was called for at the time. And FDR, you know, obviously had a whole bunch of things that he was dealing with. So, you know, anyway, Aleem, you were going to say.
No, absolutely. I agree 100%. I remember during Obama's first term, I said something very similar about, I feel like he needs to have a show. You know, a podcast wasn't in my mind at the time. I was like, he needs to have a weekly or monthly show where he goes on and discusses ideas, right, and concepts of why is the healthcare proposal looking like this, and what will this accomplish? Then it evolved. I said, well, maybe he can do a debate where he brings experts on both sides of a topic that he's trying to get the American public to pay attention to, and anything to get a conversation to bring us out of the speculation and falsehoods into real conversation and real discussion and real debate with real facts. You know, that I feel like I 100% think that's a great approach. But here's one thing, and Christian, you might have some insight on this. I personally feel like our politics have evolved so much that the old notion of staying positive and putting out positive messages, i.e., what I have accomplished versus what my predecessor or what the other has not. I don't think that's where the American public is anymore. I think we're very much negative. We want to hear the negative. Think about Donald Trump. He has been so popular purely because he's negative, and he only talks about the negative stuff. So I think you have to counter that, and you have to attack him. You have to, and not personally necessarily, even though I think it would be
definitely personally.
Yeah, so many of the things that are personal for him really were in fact legal issues. So that they're not off limits in my opinion. But I'm not even talking. You can stay entirely away from the personal legal issues and just talk about what he did when he was in office, and just talk about how bad each and every one of his policies were that he passed, and that maybe not all of them, but 99% of them. Talk about what impact they had. Talk about how they negatively affected the trajectory of our GDP. The COVID response. All of that. Talk about that, and don't let people forget that, because in 4 years people have forgotten that. They've forgotten that.
Aleem,
One second, he didn't come in.
That
He didn't come in with a bad economy and fix it. He came in with a great economy and made it worse. People don't remember that.
You clearly don't pay attention to Truth Social. Are you familiar with Dark Brandon?
No, Dark Brandon.
Oh yeah,
I can imagine.
Like I think what you're describing isn't even negative. What you're describing is just it's just right. These are facts. Yeah. So and I don't think Christian, and certainly I'm not saying that you need to just have rose-colored glasses on every time you talk about it, but I do think that you need to have a worldview to draw from when conflict happens. Like, I had one of my former bosses, he said, like, filter everything through the mission, right? I use that today at work. Like when a conflict happens, when COVID happened, okay, how are we going to deal with COVID? How are we going to, steer the ship? I would tell people all the time, we're going to filter it through our mission. Like that's going to give us our guide point. That's going to give us our guardrails.
Absolutely.
I think that's what I'm describing. And I think as it pertains to campaigning, I think in terms of reminding people, I think that train is starting to pick up speed. Right. And again, I would, I can only imagine how this is going to play out in some of the comments, but I'm not on Truth Social and I will not go on Truth Social, but I do read about some of the things that go on from the Dark Brandon account, and it is trolling at its finest. Like the fact that he's on it and he's got like these red eyes and like this really white opaque face and a black background. And
have you seen his new campaign TikTok with the mug?
No, which one?
Oh my God! So this might have come out this past week, I think, but he did this reel or TikTok where it's like, it's if you donate X amount of money, you'll get a mug in the mail, right? And and so it's a coffee mug, and you pour your hot coffee in, and as it gets hot, his face turns into Dark Brandon, and then it starts to shoot laser beams out of his eyes.
That's exactly what's on Truth Social. That's it.
My goodness.
Yeah, exactly. And Aleem, to your point about the negative, I'm not sure, like John said, I'm not sure it's strictly about negative. And what Republicans are afraid of, especially those who do not like Trump because they know his track record. I mean, let's like look back. What election has he won for the Republicans since he took the White House?
No.
Like midterms, the presidential in 2020, like nothing, right? He's lost everything. And they know that if you make the election about him, you will lose it. So it's not even about positive versus negative. If you focus on Joe Biden, then that allows space for Trump, for Truth Social, for Fox News, for Newsmax, for all these right-wing nut jobs, your what's his name, Charlie Kirk's, and all these guys. It opens a space for them to attack Biden and to talk about him being too old and too slow and messing up his words. Never mind the fact that their guy cannot complete a coherent sentence. He's like out of his mind crazy talking about bing 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 ding dong while he's trying to talk about like weapons being fired up and insane things that he's doing in real time in his, I would call them speeches, but I don't know what to call them. His
diatribe,
utterances, his utterances, right?
Utterances, yeah.
So when you make it about one versus the other, whether positive or negative isn't the point. It's the fact that if you make it about Biden at all, you open a window for taking incoming fire. You make it about Trump and only about Trump, like don't even just leave whoever the Democrats have, just leave that off to the side. You make it about Trump and who he is and what he's done, and what he's saying right now in real time. And that is the most effective thing. It's not about being so much negative versus positive. It's just pointing and being like, is this what you want?
Yeah.
Like, is this what you want?
Exactly.
And he's digging himself a hole. He honestly is. Not that this election is not in the bag. I'm not saying that at all. Like, don't take it that way. But the more he doubles down on dumb stuff, I mean, let's be real, 90+% of the time he's basically incoherent. But those few times he does come to a point, and I know it's rare, it's to say things like the fact that he single-handedly packed the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. I mean, you saw the off-year elections this past go-around with Kentucky, with Ohio, with Virginia. Whether abortion was directly on the ballot or not, when it was on the ballot, people voted in favor, including swing voters, including conservative white men in some cases, not always, of course, but in some. And in the case of Virginia, I don't believe it was directly on the ballot as a question. I have to double check that. But they won back another chamber of their state legislature. So for Democrats, so he's doing a lot of that work for you if you keep the cameras on what he's doing and show how negative it truly is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think even though we were critical of Nikki Haley on this pod, I think that the messaging coming out of her campaign now, in short, is just calling him a loser.
Yeah, well,
he is incoherent loser.
And you use facts to back it up. So
yeah,
he is like yeah. So
the problem with Haley's campaign. I mean, there's a lot of problems, and she doesn't listen to anybody clearly. But it's not so much. I mean, there are problems with her campaign in terms of messaging, in terms of structure, in terms of a lot of stuff. But what Christie's campaign and its I guess I could say failure shows is that at least in the primary electorate, the GOP primary, those voters, like what electorate is that? What audience do you have there? If the one person who came out right in front and was like, look, I know this guy, I've worked with him, he did X, Y, and Z. There are these court cases. I used to be, the U.S. attorney. I can tell you how this is going to go, that's going to go, and that's going to go. And, 5 people showed up. Everybody else booed him. I mean, that's the problem. And so what Haley did that we all made fun of her for was she tried to equivocate. She tried in Iowa, and then she got up on stage like she won the damn thing. Then she went to New Hampshire, a New England state that is, look, it's an anomaly in terms of the GOP contest. It's an open primary, so people cross over. Independents can vote. It is going to be the least evangelical, the least religious, the least MAGA state of any in this entire GOP primary. But she goes there and equivocates on the Civil War in New England. Again, I know we're repeating ourselves from previously.
Yeah.
And she did all that because she saw what happened with Christie and because she was being chicken shit and trying to have it both ways. Well, now that he has come after you and attacked you for projecting this air of being a winner and calling him a loser, now you want to go on the offensive. Well, it's too late. I mean, it's not literally too late, but it's kind of too late now. You've already set the tone for your campaign.
Well, we ended the last pod, and I asked questions about how the media should handle Trump, and I think one of the answers was I can't remember what the exact answer was, but basically when we were discussing it, we said that as it pertained to Nikki Haley, and obviously we talked about her a lot. She should. Oh, that was my question. If Donald Trump said something about your significant other, how should you respond? And both of you said, no, we should hit him hard in the media, like not let him rest.
Yeah.
Publicly. Nikki Haley should be publicly attacking him for attacking her as a woman of color every chance she gets. Like, it is incomprehensible to me how ham-handed Donald Trump and his campaign is. Like, every time they could have an advantage, they just, I mean, they are incapable of taking care of home court. So it's like, Nikki Haley, for the love of God, if you want to defeat Donald Trump, listen to me. I'm not saying play the victim. I'm just saying, let people know that this is how he treats women. This is how he treats women of color. This is how he treats families. Yeah. Right? Like, he's attacking my family. He's attacking, like, this is the guy that if Roe v. Wade is your issue, and if ostensibly you're protecting kids because you want to protect the family and that's a part of your ethos, like, he's attacking families. And, oh, by the way, he's had, I don't know how many wives and how many extramarital affairs and like on and on. Like, he is an attack to the family. He's an attack to what you hold dear. And I am the physical embodiment of that. And by the way, I want to view I was the governor of South Carolina.
Well, I mean, I don't want to give her campaign. By the way, I was going to say, John, on a much lighter note, I don't know what you did between when we tested out your microphone a few days ago and now, but the sound quality today is impeccable. So well done.
Excellent.
You sound excellent. Now, Aleem, you got to play catch up here. You know, there's one of these things is not like the other.
And then sound like I'm
right
down
now.
the hallway speaking at a microphone.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
I'm positive I heard your microwave earlier, Aleem.
Anyway, no, but
I just want to say, like, just to finish that thought, though, like, you know, not to give her campaign too much credit here, but I think that's one way in which she is correct, is that all those things, John, would have made sense prior to 2015, 2016. All the points you just made. The problem now is that everyone is so desensitized.
Yes.
Like, all of that stuff is baked in. They know he's a sleazebag. They know, because now it's become, it's pure identity, right? It's not about whether or not he's right or wrong. He's quote unquote their guy. Now, the fact that he's fleecing them, and he says he's a billionaire on TV, but still then sends out emails asking them for $5 donations. Like, none of that. They're not doing that math, right? As far as they're concerned, he is their guy because, and I'm going to be paraphrasing Steve Schmidt here, his brand or his message is not literally MAGA. And he does have a policy. He does have an appeal, and that is F you.
Yeah.
So they buy into that and say, like, oh, well, he's speaking up for us and saying F you to everybody we don't like. Immigrants, liberals, whatever. What Haley is doing, the problem is she's doing it too little too late, is attacking him on the fact that he is a loser.
Mm-hmm. So
that could have been effective, but she's already waited until the entire field has fallen out from under her and she's the only person left standing.
So here's what I would do, Christian, and I agree with you. I think these things have gotten baked in, and people have been desensitized to them. So I feel like they're still so very valid. They can be repackaged. And here's what I would suggest. I thought about this. I've thought about this several times over the past year. Is that to repackage all of these transgressions of his? You simply say, listen. Especially, you could do it on a debate stage, or you can do it on a public platform of any kind. You say, listen, I will not dignify his name or his candidacy until he apologizes, and you go down a laundry list. He apologizes unequivocally for all of these things, for his sexual harassment that has been documented, for his celebrating of that, which is on video and audio, for his, everything. Just go down the list. And there's a laundry list of things. And then you hold them accountable and you repeat it over and over and over again until it happens. You say, but
that ship has already sailed. I'm sorry to say, it's been a month now since Elise Stefanik went on Meet the Press on Sunday morning and started using the talking points about the January 6th hostages and started doing all of that. I mean, these people already have been conditioned. And when I say these people, I mean his followers, Trump's followers, so people who are, they already.
Yeah, forget
right.
them. Yeah.
Right.
I'm talking about
but for people who are, well, that's the thing, is that for the most part, right now, we're not there yet. We're not, I mean, we sort of are going into the general. I've talked about my feelings on that and written about it, but if you're talking about from the point of view of Haley's campaign, was that?
Plug your article that you hashtag.
Well, there's
not hashtag up. Link at the bottom.
I think that one I didn't publish yet because I got sick. I decided to go to bed instead. But I will post that at some point. But what was I saying? Just that for the people that Haley needs to talk to, which is again, I'm not quite sure who's left anymore until we get to an actual general election electorate and audience for the mass media. The right wing and Trump's followers, they're so bought into, again, I know that there are people who don't love Biden, don't love Trump, who are not into politics. And believe me, I'm working on that. I'm writing on that. I get it. But I'm talking about for this moment, this early on, the people who are engaged at this point in the game, they're not, as far as they're concerned, these are quote unquote, witch hunts. They're not based. They've already discredited the courts and the justice system so much to a very scary extent that they're not going to go for that. What has to happen is Trump has to be embarrassed. Trump has to be embarrassed. We've become so deluded as an electorate and as a society that we're now back to the point where it really does come back to, cautionary tales, fables, and proverbs. And at this point, when it comes to Trump, sorry, I'm almost done with this tirade. But when it comes to Trump, it really is the emperor has no clothes. Like nothing else is going to work. He needs to be embarrassed publicly and have the facade crumble. Facts are not going to work.
So I'm going to go a little bit differently, and this is why I am bullish on Nikki Haley's strategy.
Okay.
Would you sign up to say that this has some of the makings of Ross Perot and George Bush?
As in a spoiler candidate?
She runs it as an independent?
Yep.
Well,
and think about it this way. I believe Ross Perot got like 10% of the vote in that election.
It may have even more than that. I don't know. It was a lot, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But Bill Clinton got 40. I think he got like 47% of the vote. He did not have a majority of the vote.
Yeah.
But it was a split. And if I recall correctly, Christian, you know this history way better than I do. George Bush's critical sin was that he said he wasn't going to raise taxes, and then he had to.
Yeah.
And he did it, and he lost people. And it created an opening for Ross Perot to credibly run.
Yeah.
I don't think Ross Perot was ever. I don't think there was any illusions that he was ever going to win, but the damage was already done.
So
right, he was a spoiler candidate.
I think your point. I actually thought about this as well, John. Is that, but I didn't think of it from Nikki Haley. I thought it actually from Chris Christie. I thought Chris Christie.
No way.
If you heard what Chris Christie said upon his exit, he said, "I cannot." I mean, he was really.
The hot mic moment.
What is that? No,
the hot mic.
Not the hot mic moment. After that, when he was like, "Listen,
okay,
I can't. I'm going to do everything in my power to stop him from being like." I mean, so to me, I took that as that he might be looking for an opportunity to run a spoiler campaign, and I think he actually would be effective. To be honest with you, he has appeal, but he probably would hurt Democrats as much as Republicans, Republican vote.
Well, that's always my fear with any spoiler candidate as a strategy is that it who you pull from. That's a huge risk. I mean, we see that with RFK is that the people who he's pulling from sometimes are extremely far left who might otherwise vote for a Democrat, even begrudgingly, but they're not going to vote for a Republican. But then you look at who's actually financially backing him. They know what they're doing. They know they're trying to pull votes away from Biden. With Haley, like John, I get your point, but there's a few different variables here that are just so fundamentally different. Like Trump is not technically he's not an incumbent right now. He doesn't have that one thing that turned off a key group of his constituents, like reneging on taxes, the way that Bush did. He's got a million other sins and 91 indictments or counts against him, but they don't seem to care about that. And then, Christie, whatever you think of him personally, he's not stupid.
No.
And I don't think he's wrong about Haley. I don't think that constitutionally she has it in her.
No,
I don't.
So here's what I say. I agree with you. And I actually followed a lot of what Chris Christie, his messaging, right? Like he was very consistent and very poignant with his messaging as to why Donald Trump was unfit for office. But I didn't think that he was ever a legitimate candidate for the president of the United States of America. I don't think he has that appeal. I think that the optics of Chris Christie, for one reason or the other, don't play well with the electorate. I don't think he is appealing to Republicans, and he may have some appeal to Democrats, but he is so damaged and tarnished by his advocacy of Donald Trump. I don't think Democrats would trust him. Nikki Haley, for all the reasons that I just said, and for the window that she has to craft this message, I think that she is the perfect spoiler. And I'm not, tracking the money, but my impression is that there is a lot of money being spent. Think of the George Conway wing of the party that are never Trumpers. They will do anything in their power to rescue their party from Donald Trump. And I think if that means supporting Nikki Haley to the detriment of Donald Trump, I can see a path to that. Like, to me, that makes sense. I could be wrong. This is the musings of just some guy that is not in politics. But it seems like if you were going to have a strategy to to release the Republican Party from Donald Trump and or vice versa, this is your time to do it. You've got an opportunity with Nikki Haley. You've got the messaging baked in. If you can support her financially through the end and somehow, for the love of God, get the two of them on stage before. And like, look, the window is really narrow. Like Super Tuesday is going to tell us just about everything we need to know. But, you know, he is begging, Donald Trump, that is begging and pleading for dear life to not have to be on stage and not have to campaign against anyone at all, for good reason. One, he's not going to have the time. He's not going to have the faculty. And two, it is dangerous. To Aleem's point, what if Nikki Haley went on stage and said, like, look, here are the things that you need to apologize to the American public for, starting at the top, COVID. You need to apologize. I'm making that up. I mean, there's so many different things, but you know, if we're talking about a strategy to, and I'm saying this as nonpartisan as I can, to really release the country. You know, I don't want to talk about Donald Trump anymore. Like, I actually don't like it, you know, but it is something that we have to deal with as a country. But if we're going to release his stranglehold and like, look, you know, I think it's a wonderful thing that people have the agency to vote for whom they want. And maybe if I'm running for office, I want to persuade you to vote for me, but you still have a vote. And I think it's important for you to have that. But if the Republican Party wants to detangle itself from Donald Trump and recast itself as a credible party going in the future, my musing, my thought, everyone can disagree, that's fine. I'll be in this little house by myself. You need to get behind Nikki Haley and have her be that spoiler candidate. And I think she can do better than anyone else.
I think she'd be useful, that's for sure. But
I think, actually, I thought Tim Scott could do it too, but
oh my God,
he just
oh my God.
Here's why. Oh my God.
Here's why. His name. Here's why. Here's why. At least his attempt, he made an attempt to use your word, Aleem, to positively frame and cast his candidacy. The only problem is that he was clearly not going to cross Donald Trump.
We saw that on live TV. Yeah.
He was right, him and Vivek Ramaswamy right next to Donald Trump, just with the For people that are listening to this, I'm not even going to put for what it is that I just did.
Don't do the hat. Oh God, don't. The hat makes it too real. Oh, the hat makes it too real.
It was so sad. It was just sad. Like, did you see Nikki Haley on The Breakfast Club? By the way.
Oh, I saw the outtake. I saw clips. Yeah, I didn't watch the full interview.
I'm always disappointed in when Republicans get interviewed because nobody ever asks them the questions I would ask them. It's like, come on, explain this for me. Like, you know, how does this even work? You know, this policy. Like, anyway, but neither here nor there. It's like,
I mean, look, I go back and forth on the policy thing because I've been a policy wonk since I was literally in middle school, and I know, I was super cool. But you know, there are times that I really miss and long for a good old fashioned like in-depth policy debate, getting into, you know, past precedents, other historical analogs, other analogs around the world, talking about all different sorts of things. Now at this point, like, the situation is so dire. If I were to sit across from a never Trump Republican, I'd be like, look, we can talk about tax policy, reparations, whether or not the earth is flat, any of that shit can wait until after the election. Like, I like literally, I will debate you till the cows come home once we make sure we still have a democracy in which we're allowed to debate, right? Like everything else, literally everything else. And I think this is an important thing that everyone has to remember. No matter what you care about, it's not going to matter if someone with autocratic tendencies or who wants to be a full-on autocrat is in office. It won't matter. It doesn't matter how important you think it is. Everything comes after democracy. Everything comes after having a system in place in which we're allowed to debate, in which the rule of law binds everyone as citizens, including people in power, and where might doesn't necessarily make right.
I think that talking about things in the context of democracy might be too nebulous, and or to undefined as well, nebulous, undefined. I would drill down even further. Like, the Constitution says that you have the ability to speak in most circumstances without fear of retribution from the government. Like, that is who we are. You know, like, your vote is this. You have the right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure. Like, on and on and on. Like, in addition to democracy, it's not just democracy that's on the ballot. It's the Constitution that's on the ballot.
Yeah.
I'd actually love to hear Democrats start to take some ownership over that. The Constitution is on the ballot, right? Like, right now, you are enjoying the privileges of the Constitution, whether you are pulling for Biden or not. You're enjoying it because you can be critical of him, and Joe Biden isn't going to send a goon squad after your family. And he doesn't talk about it. Conversely, you've got someone that says they will do that exact same thing.
Yeah.
They will do this. That they will do that.
Right.
The Constitution
that's the chilling thing.
Yeah.
Well, so your argument then is that makes it a little more concrete, saying Constitution versus democracy. Is that sort of
what kind of government? What kind of government is China?
Republic.
Communist dictatorship.
Everybody knows it's a republic.
Okay, not nominally, but like in actuality.
but you get the point that I'm making. Like, you can hold yourself out as a Republican the same way that we are, and have nothing that we have. Right? Like, the Constitution is on the ballot, not just democracy. Like, you think for a second that Donald Trump would get in office and then abolish democratic democracy? Like, he wouldn't survive. Like, that, everyone would be like, oh God, no. Yeah. He would chop away the Constitution. And still keep a democracy. Like, people would still vote.
Yeah. I mean, he's already,
but I mean,
and there's history of him attempting that on several occasions. So.
And what is problematic is that for years, Democrats have been ceding the point that Republicans are constitutionalists, they're originalists. You know, like, anytime someone talks about, the Second Amendment, they're like, yo, I'm just about the Constitution.
Right.
Like, okay, tell me about the Constitution. No, the Constitution is on the ballot. I think it was, it might have been Dean Crooms from the Howard University School of Law that said, you want to think about what's important to the framers, think about the way that they ordered the Bill of Rights. Right? Like, those are the things that are most important. Right. And you look at what is the First Amendment to the United States Constitution?
The First Amendment.
Christian.
Number one.
Right? Freedom of speech. Yeah.
The freedom of speech, press, assembly. Like, there's
but
a whole lot.
But of course, though, the people who are all in for Trump, and even those who aren't, people who lean right, are so. And I'm not talking about conservative legal scholars, of course. They would know this like the back of their hand. I'm talking about regular people. Are so misinformed about that. They think that the First Amendment gives them the right to say what they want without any pushback, any retribution whatsoever, and that anything that anytime that they say something and people then respond to them or attack them if they say something atrocious, or in the case of social media or other web platforms, they get deplatformed because they say something abusive, dangerous, threatening, whatever. They think that's an actual infringement upon their First Amendment rights. They don't realize is that the First Amendment forbids the national legislature, Congress, from doing certain things. First among them being regulating someone's freedom of speech. Of course, there's also, freedom of religion, not being able to establish a certain government-approved church, all these different things, right? But that's the point. It's not, you can say what you want to without any pushback, but they believe that. It's that Congress cannot impose that upon you. It cannot
that would restrict.
Exactly. And so even there, again, I hate to keep coming back to this, but we are in I don't want to say a post-fact era, but for our purposes, for right now, for this election, it is in a lot of ways post-fact. And people who are already, look, if you're talking about people who are persuadable, fine, but people who are already that far down the road, they truly believe that there's a war, quote unquote, on everything that they believe in. That's why they feel embattled. That's why they go for Trump. That's why they go for this FUism that he is selling them. And they don't understand the fact that the Constitution does have protections for them to talk shit, for them to have a gun, et cetera, and so forth. They don't realize that those things are not absolute, and the fact that just because you have rights doesn't mean you don't also have some responsibilities.
And
what I would say,
I was going to say, the only issue I have with focusing on the Constitution as opposed to democracy in general is sort of tied to what Christian was just explaining, is that people don't necessarily, they all feel like the Constitution applies to them, but not other people. So it's like, it doesn't, it's not a universal understanding and appreciation for the Constitution in the same way. That doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. So it's like freedom of speech for me and not you, that's the freedom of religion for me, but not you, it's like that's really how people look at it. So I'm not so sure that would resonate better than speaking about democracy, but it's neither here nor there. But I really wanted to talk very quickly about speaking of Tim Scott, the black vote, right?
Tim Scott.
Wait, before you do that, really quickly, hold that point. I just want to say really quickly, just to put a pin on that so we can shift, because I know we got other stuff to cover. The point that I'm making with that is like, fine, it's a difficult argument, but is it any less effective than talking about democracy? Like, what in the world does that mean?
Sure.
Right? But I think that there is enough. Donald Trump has given enough information, enough attack points where you could say, okay, this is the freedom. This is how freedom of religion is imperiled, right? Mm-hmm. Speech, press, association, assembly. Mm-hmm. Like, you could go just those 5 things right there. You forget the rest of the I don't say forget the rest. You don't have to address, because the Constitution gets it's complicated. Like, that's where you get into, like, yes, maybe you should either do a lot of reading and or be a lawyer, to really kind of talk thoroughly through this, because it just becomes heady and academic, mm-hmm. right? But those 5 things are things that resonate with people every single day.
Yeah. So
like people go to their houses of worship weekly, if not daily.
So
people enjoy the freedom to speak, to assemble, like all of these things. Like, you could even say, like, look, by the way, even though they shouldn't, the fact that shouldn't have, because I don't know if they were permitted to, like literally permitted to, but to be on the Capitol on January 6th. Like, this is both association and assembly, right? Like, these are things that are essential to who we are. Like, this is how we have a more informed, and then maybe that's when you talk about democracy and republic, and a more engaged democracy and republic. Like, that's how you tie it in, and you can make it simple. But you don't have to use a whole lot of highfalutin, legalese and legal terms and legal theories. I think that because Donald Trump does it on a daily basis, and he's clear that he would attack some of these things because they're not favorable to him. That's where you hit him. Forget the democracy thing. Like, okay, like, what does that mean? Russia's a democracy, and right. What does that actually mean? Yeah. All right, Aleem, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think that maybe the answer is you talk about both. So you discuss them in both contexts, and you connect the two, just as you mentioned. But as far as the black vote is what I was thinking about, in that, I don't know, I think it was last month or the month before last, some numbers came out where I think Biden was only like at 70% of the black vote, and those are bad numbers for Democrats, to say the least. Especially, I think when he won the election, we're like at 95% or something like that. Mm-hmm. So the concern, as you browse the social media platforms, you get the sense that people are so confused about what this president versus the previous president have done and what they have not done. And even going back to Obama, I still see several people I know well who, it's like, well, what did Obama do for us? It's like, come on, really? Mm-hmm. You don't really know that by now. You don't really. The only reason someone would say that is they've gotten a hold of some misinformation that has been forced down their throat for probably several years now, and unchecked, right? So and this is the interesting thing about the interference in our election process. I to this day, I don't think people really understand the significance of that, and it's still continuing. Like, you can see certain posts and things like, man, this has a really interesting undertone to it that I don't know if
Mhm.
people are picking up on. And it's like, it's all meant to sort of massage people in a direction where they start to reject things that are traditionally progressive. And it's really,
Well, that's the thing. That's why I would push back gently and say it's never been forced down anyone's throat, right? And if you are, and the problem is there are different people at work doing this sort of thing, domestic and foreign, and for the foreign actors, especially Russia, with the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg, starting with the last presidential election, or excuse me, the one prior to that, they got an incredible return on their investment. I mean, the estimates on what they actually spent on Facebook ads, it was, you know, in the hundreds of thousands to push people either toward Trump or push them away from voting altogether. And they don't actually force feed anything. What they do is they exhaust people's critical thinking. They get you so frazzled with the back and forth and the whataboutism, and that's actually a Soviet propaganda technique. Is, you know, well, what about? And you see it now being done by pro-Trump media for years now. But basically, get your faculties so exhausted, your critical thinking skills so exhausted that you just kind of say, "Well, I don't know, you know, everyone's doing it." And you see now, several years out, that's exactly the sort of things that when they do the man on the street interviews with Trump supporters, those are the sort of things that they say. So they do that, and they also will, you know, in advertising, or especially in digital, you call it A/B testing. You know, you try a couple different ads in the same set and see which ones outperform the others and go with that. Well, with this, what they do is, you know, they don't have one message go out. They have a message for black voters. They have a message for, you know, far left white progressives. They have like all different things, and they follow these things very closely, and they use messages that play upon what they already know are the preconceived beliefs and notions of different demographics, of different groups, so that they'll latch onto that and then start spreading it on their own, of their own volition. We are spreading information or misinformation that just appeals to our own beliefs and biases. And so, the problem is that when you talk about it, one, you sound crazy. I know I sound conspiratorial right now for talking about this, even though it's been thoroughly documented by journalists and other writers and members of the intelligence community. But then also, too, it's hard to quantify. Like, there's a reason now, if I want to run anything on a Meta platform, whether it's writing that is political in nature or opines in a matter of public interest, or run an ad on behalf of a client that talks about matters of public interest or anything political, you know, you have to go through a whole clearance process and show your ID and get pre-approved. You have to redo it all these multiple times and all of that, because they could show that this had been going on starting in 2015, 2016. But so you can, on the one hand, show, roughly speaking anyway, how much, say, a Russian agency or other foreign agency paid. You can you know, get those receipts. On the other hand, you can't actually quantify how many people that persuaded to vote one way or dissuaded them from voting altogether. Those are answers we will die never knowing, unfortunately.
No, I get it. Yeah, it's just concerning to me that like I said, it wasn't forced down to them, but it was people have brought this into their own sphere willingly, because it was so customized for them. So it's something for them to latch onto, and like you said, I mean, you'll see things that talk about putting women in certain positions in society, and they'll massage it into religion and faith and God, and it's like, well, and therefore, you know, it's like, man, do you see what this is doing? And I'll see men reposting this, you know, guys who may be jaded or feel some kind of way about their manhood and interactions with women. They'll repost.
There's a lot of that.
Man, do you see?
There's a lot of that.
Yeah, and it's like, wow, nobody really understands that. You know, it's like, it's scary, and it's our generation and younger, you know. And
a lot younger sometimes.
It's amazing. It's like, man, this guy, what's his name? Alex Tate, something Tate. whatever, I forget his name, but he's
hugely
popular, misogynistic scumbag. I mean, like
human trafficker.
Yeah,
human trafficker.
Like it's amazing. And you've got guys, you've got professional athletes, men, black men, white men, doesn't matter, all kinds of them, all aligning and reposting things he writes. And you'll see one thing he writes that might be a little bit more innocuous, and it's like, oh well, that sounds all right. And then you dig a little bit deeper into other things that he's written about and talked about, and it's like, man, he's all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to what I was talking about with Joe Biden, though. Like, it's clear. I mean, like, that guy has a worldview that he is strident in standing by. Like, this is who I am. This is what it should be. And this will solve all of your problems. Right? Like, if we were just more masculine, if we would treat women in this way, and we would, as men, act in this way, then all of our societal problems will be solved. Right? Like, that is what he's doing. And at some point, if it hasn't happened already, like, it catches up with you because you got to start living the life that you're talking about. Right. And I think, when I see someone like that, like, I see it, I turn it off. What I have seen, though, like, he gets on and it's not just the way that he talks. He's like, I got the fancy cars. I have the things as a man that you desire. And the reason that you don't have them is because you're not man enough. So there's both the worldview and there's the challenge. And I don't think that's either healthy or virtuous or true. But, it's easy for people because people don't have time to just sit and think all day about the greater mysteries of society and life and culture and philosophy and virtue. Like, everyone's too busy working all the time. Right. Yeah. So, like, what is your, like, you get on, you get out that device from your pocket that's got all of the information that has ever been known in mankind. And you look at a guy like that and be like, oh, I think I'm going to go with that, because you can't possibly start to look at all of this stuff. Like, I love watching Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I love watching Star Talk. And when I'm watching it, I think he does a great job of reducing astrophysics down to something that is digestible enough. Right? Like, I think that's brilliant, but I still wonder if the things that he is saying, the things that he says, I know there are people that are listening to it and be like, no, that can't be true because I don't understand it. So I'm just going to go with this. Right? Like that, going back earlier, that's also the world that we live in. It's like, like, this is easier for me because I don't, I don't want to study cosmology. Right? Like, I'm not going to, like, he's got Dr. Tyson has like a degree in astrophysics, like geology and philosophy, I think, something ridiculous like that. Like, a very well-rounded, but anyway, my point is, it's easier. Like, it's easier to be like, oh yeah, the world is flat, because when I walk out of my house, this is what I observe. And because I can't be challenged in that way, because I don't have the ability to think about it. We talked about this at my birthday. There's only so much thinking that, people that are already tapped out can do. Yeah. And that's not a knock. It's like, what can you do? No, and like, true. I think philosophy has been writing about that certainly since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. Like, education and contemplation might be something that is, almost restricted exclusively for the people that have the means to not work.
Well, I mean, that was actually a huge point of the labor movement in this country in the 19th century and into the 20th, it wasn't just having, your work confined to certain hours in the day, but it was having enough time for sleep, enough time for work, and then enough time for a combination of family, recreation, self-education, reading, and being part of your community, church, going to union meetings, things like that. They knew that. If you as that movement has been undercut and people have been forced to work longer hours, and as we've kind of done some backsliding on that front up until extremely recently, by which I mean like right now, we see that is that everybody is working all the time. And yes, like, you can argue that materially things have gotten better than people's grandparents, right? That, you've got devices and air conditioning and TV and all these modern comforts. Sure. But are people more engaged? Are they more part of their communities there, whether it's in a religious or secular sense, part of their neighborhoods, part of their churches. But no, of course not. We have data on that. We can show that people are more and more estranged from those around them. And that is because of being overworked. And there's the immediate problem of being more cut off from people and the mental health impacts of that. But then, to your point, John, then yeah, people eventually tap out. If you have gone and worked a few hours and you're not exhausted and you have time to go exercise and read and educate yourself, you're doing great. You're doing better than most. If you've worked all day and into the evening and you're flat out and you're exhausted, you're not going to go and do those things. You're going to get takeout and you're going to flop in front of Netflix and you're going to crash. And that's not a knock at anybody. We've all been there. Unless you were born very privileged, and you had to, we've all been there. But that is a huge problem. I had a friend who asked me, who's a foreign journalist, who asked me, why is it that when these horrible things happen, like Roe gets overturned, why is DC not a mess? Why are there not millions of people taking over the streets? And I'm like, oh, you don't know, do you? He's like, what? I'm like, even white collar employees, even people who are making six figures, because of the cost of living relative to salaries, relative to wages, and how many hours you have to work to just get by and get that, even people at six figures, even people high five figures, you are only a couple of missed paychecks from losing everything. And so, yeah, you're going to stay in line. You don't need to have an autocrat tell you what to do. You have the economic anxiety that's keeping you in check.
Like, I know I could talk about this for the next hour and a half, but my point, I guess my final point on that, Christian, I think you're absolutely right, is that one, we've made a virtue out of work.
Yeah.
And then to take it a step further, we confused hard work with long work. So in other words, like, it is totally conceivable that you could work really hard for 6 hours out of a day from 9 to 3, right? That doesn't necessarily mean, I'm sorry. So you can work hard from 9 to 3. In today's society, if you work 6 hours, it's like, oh, you're being lazy. You're not working hard enough.
Right.
Why not? Like, if I work 6 hours, and let's just say that I work 5.5 hours, I took 30 minutes for lunch, for God's sake. But if I work 9 to 3, why am I doing anything less? Like, what are the extra hour and a half going to do? And that's just a 9 to 5. That's just your standard work day.
Yeah.
What about, I'll never forget, Christian, I think when we were 1Ls, I had one of our professors tell me, like, look, if you see an first year associate, and they tell you they go home by 7 o'clock, they're not going to make it to their second year. And they've already gotten to the office at 8. They're on, if they're working anything less than 12 hours a day, and we're not even talking about billing.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, they're not working hard enough. It's just a blanket assumption that you can't do enough work if you're not working yourself to a sick place.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
literally,
this is a problem that we have. Like, it is not a virtue to work until you go to sleep and then wake up and just do it again. Like, there is nothing that we should find virtuous about that. Like,
unfortunately,
that is clearly
we do.
problematic. Yeah. I mean, like, look, I'm trying to stop it right here on this pod. Like, yo, I'm all about hard work. Like, I think hard work produces something special in you, like when you push yourself. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to work as long as you physically can all the time. That's something like totally different.
When we had Terrain as a guest on the pod, he talked about that when he is doing something to Terrain Davis, that is, when he's going to embark on a next venture, open a new business or grow one or whatever, there is time to reflect and talk it over and plan it with his spouse, with his wife. And then there's a plan for like 90, maybe 120 days of digging deep and, going all out. But that's not your whole life. That's like, you're doing that hard work, not long work. Like you said, you're doing that hard work to achieve a goal, but that's not what most Americans will have to do. It's working hard just to please your boss so that you can then come back and get some more. It's not about actually getting ahead, and it's not about quality. It really purely is quantity.
I have an informal rule with my team. I was talking with one of our senior managers recently, and we were talking about time off. And it's interesting. This person has developed a habit of feeling like they can't leave their post because they're afraid that if something goes wrong and they're not there and their team, the team needs this person, that they won't be there and everything will just fall. And it's like, look, one, you've got to structure your work life in such a way where you can have downtime when you can disconnect. And if I get the sense that if you are exhausting yourself, because it's clear, like if you're a leader and you're leading people and you're tapped into them, you know when they're going beyond what they can do. One, it's you see some diminishment in their work. You know, you can maybe check with their health. I mean, there's so many different things, but it's so important for me to make clear to my team, like, you need to rest. And I do the same thing. You know, like on the weekends, unless I really have to do something and it's planned out, I intend to rest. I intend to turn off my work phone and I intend to rest because you need it. Like, you know, your life cannot revolve around work. And I know it's easy for me to say, but going back to also young voters for just a second, I think they see that too. You know, like that, you remember last year, that big to do about quiet quitting?
Yeah. And that was like, so disingenuous, all those articles. Yeah.
But it's like, look, I understand as an employer, oh my God, you know, what does that mean? Are people just going to do their jobs and that's it?
Right.
And there is
ridiculous.
Trevor Noah said that, like, yeah, guys, that's the point. But I think what is underneath that is like, we take advantage of people. Like, we expect the extra to be the norm. And then when people don't do the extra, then we penalize for it rather than appreciating when people do the extra. I mean, I'm going to be honest. You know, one of my team members yesterday said, like, yo, can you just acknowledge that I'm doing extra? And if I'm really honest, my initial reaction was, it was a little indignation. But as this person talked through it, I was like, okay, no, I hear it. You know, like, there's a lot on your shoulders, whether I am there pushing you on a daily basis or not. Like, just the pride of ownership of your work, that all the pressure is there. It's actually a saying that I developed from coaching. All the pressure you need is on the court. Like, you don't need it from me. You don't need it from your boss. You don't need artificial pressure from me. Like, you just don't need it. So anyway.
Well, speaking of getting some rest, I assume you guys will be putting your feet up to watch the Super Bowl. Is that going down? Is that going to be happening?
Yeah, I'll probably check I'll check it out. I usually try to make buffalo shrimp. Well, actually more than, and I used to make my gumbo too, but that's like, it costs so much to make it. I made it for the holidays, so I won't make it again. but
well, I saw you at John's, not this past birthday, but the previous one. I saw you turn a pizza into like a $50 venture. So I fully trust and believe that you're capable of making something too expensive to be worth cooking.
That's true. The price on seafood these days is kind of high. Yeah, but no. So I guess if the point wasn't clear, watching the Super Bowl for my family is more of an eating activity than it is of sports watching.
Right.
My team is
fair enough.
The New York Jets haven't been in it in it's going on about what, 50 years now? 55 years actually.
I was going to say, I think it's more than that.
5 years,
yeah.
So I mean,
I was going to say, I'm not even a sports fan, and I think that's pretty. Yeah, I think I knew that. Yeah. Well, John, what about you?
I'm absolutely going to watch it, and I'm very curious about certainly the last couple of Super Bowls with the rise of Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah,
and the discussions around the black quarterback in particular. So last week he played Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens, and it was like the Ravens' year. The narrative around Lamar Jackson, as long as he's been in the league, is that he is a running quarterback, right? Which is so often how black quarterbacks are labeled, whether they're good at it or not. You know, like, they're athletic, they're mobile quarterbacks. Like, the assumption is that they can't actually perform the functions of a quarterback. They just happen to do it because they can throw the ball, but they're elusive and they can run. So let's just have him back there. Well, anyway, in the game last week, the Ravens had the best running offense in football, I think. They had 6 planned runs last week. And it was all over the news. It was, you know, people were saying this is kind of one of the worst play calling efforts that an offensive coordinator has ever had. And there was also a lot of people chatting like, hey, man, you know, Lamar Jackson was also sitting in the pocket for a while and he wasn't running. And the narrative was like, hey, people must have gotten into Lamar's head. Like, you need to be, in order for you to be an authentic quarterback, a proper quarterback, you need to stay in the pocket and beat the team throwing, even if they are virtually unbeatable when he decides to run. This is a guy that has had numerous literally perfect games. There's, Kirsten, I know you probably don't follow this way, but they have a stat that's the QBR. And I think I looked at this once, but he just has a slew of literal perfect games. So that's a combination of yards per pass. It's a combination of it's yards per pass. It's completion percentage. It's touchdowns. It's intercept. It is an overall view of the effectiveness of the quarterback. And as far as that statistic was concerned, he was perfect. Like, this is something that he does with some kind of regularity. He is that good. And for whatever reason, they're like, what we're not going to do? We're not going to do the thing that you're really good at that other people can't stop. And so many last year for the Super Bowl, Michael Vick, Donovan McNabb, and Jalen Hurts, all Philadelphia Eagles quarterbacks. And Jalen Hurts, a guy that's mobile as well. Everyone sits down, and the conversation still to this day is, okay, how do we deal with the black quarterback? What does it mean? Like, how do you play the position as a black quarterback? Because people are going to tell you, because you were just a better athlete than the other people on the field. You're a better athlete than the defenders, and you control what happens because you've got the football in your hands. Like, no one knows what you're going to do until you make the decision. And if they got a game plan for you to be a passer or a runner, how do they deal with you? So, I don't know if you two have kind of thoughts or opinions on this, but what advice would you give to a guy like Lamar Jackson? Like, look, as it pertains to the Super Bowl, I'm gonna watch it. I'm pulling for the Patriots. I mean, the Patriots. The Chiefs. The new Patriots. The Chiefs.
What?
I'll explain why I said that too. It's a Freudian slip, but there's a lot of discussion now that the Chiefs have become the new Patriots just because they've done so much.
So many, yeah.
And
I do not have any thoughts. I don't. I'll pass this to Aleem. I am not qualified on this particular topic.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
Did we lose your interest?
No, I got something I had distracted me.
No, I was going to say, passing the question to you about John's question, because I'm not qualified to answer.
Oh,
what advice would you give Lamar Jackson?
Well, as far as his performance, or in the off season, so to speak.
All the above.
I think he's got to continue down the path he was on. I mean, he's an athlete playing a sport that's challenging with people trying to stop you from being great and accomplishing your goals. So I think what we saw in that game was less of his failure than it was just an artifact of tough competition and his learning process. I mean, the guy's great at what he does. He's better at it than probably almost everybody else in the league, except for Patrick Mahomes at this point. So I would just say, stay strong and persevere. I think the guy's great. He's very he's humble. He seems to be very focused. He understands growth takes time. So. I don't think he needs much correction. I think criticism is just because people have the time to criticize, so they do. So it's pretty simple from my perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he is. Football is one of those games where it's really easy to see that someone is better than the other people. Like, if other people can't stop you and there's 11 other people on the other side of the ball trying to stop you and they can't do it ever, they keep doing that thing that the other 11 people can't stop you doing ever. It should be that simple to me. And you've got to be really careful about the circle that you have around you and what you listen to. That's the other piece. Yeah. Because as I've learned, everyone wants to be a part of your success and everyone wants to tell you how to be better. Everyone. and not everyone needs to tell you how to be better because they don't know what it's like to walk in your shoes. Speaking of football and walking in people's shoes, I think it is interesting that, I don't know if you guys know this, but there is a grand conspiracy between the National Football League and Taylor Swift to get Joe Biden elected.
Right. Yes, I've heard of this. Yeah. Apparently, there's something suspicious about, usually the pretty girl and the football player don't get. Apparently that's never happened before in an American high school or celebrity culture, or I don't know, any movie made in the past since films were invented. It's the whole thing.
He even wears his Letterman's jacket. That's the funny part. He doesn't have real Letterman's jacket, but you get the point that I'm making.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it is fear and paranoia. Like, I was thinking about this earlier.
Yeah.
Like, no one says anything when the Lakers show every celebrity that's sitting courtside at a Lakers game.
Right.
Like, it's actually the thing that makes the Lakers game appealing, especially because, with the exception of 2020, the Lakers have been miserable for the last decade. But or the Knicks. Sorry, Liam.
Well,
but the Knicks, like,
I follow players,
you show
anyway,
you show Spike Lee. Shout out to Spike Lee. You show him on the sidelines at a Knicks game, and the Knicks are actually really good this year. They're really good this year. So, but like for the, they haven't won. Also, like the Jets, they haven't won since, I don't know, the 60s.
Who's
70s?
That? The Knicks.
The Knicks.
73, I think it was, maybe. But at least they've been real tough a lot of times in the 90s. So a little more recently.
But at any rate, I think it's hilarious. I actually like what Dave Letterman said. Basically, just like shut up and leave them alone. Like how I was thinking about this too. I can't imagine having so many people rooting against your relationship, like vocally, and without knowing you at all. Like they just have an opinion they don't even have an opinion. They just have reactions as people from the outside, just saying, "Oh my God, this is a hoax. This is fake." Like,
I think they also
leave them alone.
I think they also they're not self-aware enough to realize how they look to everyone else. Like they're so convinced of their conspiracy theory. Or maybe they're not so convinced of it, the ones who are spreading it, but they're so convinced that other people will hear it and pick up on it. They don't realize how absolutely ridiculous this looks. I mean, like, again, I know I was being really snarky before, but it's true. Like, if you're going to pick the subject for a conspiracy theory, like pop star gets with athlete, has big, has photo ops, and, like, what? And of course, they had to tie the vaccine into it too. Don't forget. So now they're calling him Mr. Pfizer because apparently he did some like 30-second spot.
He did a commercial.
Yeah, he did a quick spot about getting the shot, whatever. Like it's they don't realize how insane they look, and this entire thing that they're going to make it an us versus them and have it be like the Trump team versus the Swifties. Like, I was a terrible math student, but like those are not numbers that they can win against. I mean, Taylor Swift can sell out stadiums, forget in this country, like around the planet. Trump at this point now cannot fill a high school auditorium for one of his rambling rallies. I mean, so this entire thing that it's like a, Battle of the Titans, it's like the Trump followers versus the Swifties. I mean, it's insane. It's just, is not.
No. Apparently, they're getting Kid Rock to come and face off against Taylor Swift.
Oh! I heard the other one. One of the Fox News guys was saying, because I caught the clips on late night. What was it yesterday? And they're like, "Well, we don't have Taylor Swift, but we've got Kid Rock and we've got Ted Nugent." Speaking of things not relevant since 1973, Aleem, they've got Ted Nugent. So,
there you go.
Cat scratch fever. There you go.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's sad and it's desperate, but that's kind of the world we live in, though. It's all projection, right? You talk about Trump and all of his followers part of these different, conspiratorial worlds and talking about crazy things in the internet, and then they come back with no, the real conspiracy is, again, like the pop star and the jock got together, got people all excited to see them on TV. I mean, it's just projection as usual. All right, guys, any closing thoughts? Any predictions, John, for the Super Bowl?
We're going to do our top 5 Denzel movies. We're going to wait till next pod.
Well, we brought some people to this one who probably wouldn't fit as well.
I was going to say, yeah, I'm not sure I did my homework on that, to be honest. I was.
By the way, ironically, I just watched Stealth last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. Stealth? I'm sorry, I said Stealth Flight. I don't know why I always want to say Stealth. But Flight, yeah, Stealth.
You did that on the last pod, too.
Yeah, I watched it just before the last pod.
You did? Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
No, you said Stealth.
You did, yeah.
Stealth.
It always is in my head. It's weird. Like, it's not nearly the same movie. They're not even similar, other than the fact that they involve a plane. But, yeah. One has got Jamie Foxx.
Well, I got... here's to answer your question about the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. The challenge is that history says that the team with the better defense is going to win the Super Bowl.
Okay.
I think the 49ers probably have a better overall defensive cast, but I think the Chiefs may have a better defense. I don't look at the ratings, but I think that's close. So let's just say for the sake of argument, that's a wash. Well, then you got to look to who's the next best player, and far and away it's Patrick Mahomes. And Brock Purdy is a good quarterback for San Francisco. I think he is outplayed. He was the last person drafted in his draft class. The title for him is Mr. Irrelevant. That's what everyone that's the last person in the draft gets. To his credit, I mean, he is a very, very competent quarterback. He's good at reading defenses. He's got a great arm. Christian McCaffrey is their San Francisco's running back. He is a wild card too. Like, he can be absolutely unstoppable. He shredded my Philadelphia Eagles like we weren't even there, even though everyone started doing that after he did it. But the combination of Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce that's hard. Plus, they got a great running back in Isaiah Pacheco. People say that he runs like he hates the earth, and
it's funny. Yeah,
it is funny to watch him run. But I think it's going to be a good matchup. I think it's going to be a close football game. I think it's going to be low scoring, something to the tune of like 21-17 Chiefs, maybe 24-21 Chiefs, but something less than 26 points for sure. So that's my prediction.
It's a good one because I understood at least half of it. So thank you. That was
there. You go. But see, that's what we could also do with the First Amendment. Make it relatable.
Exactly.
Come on now. And on that note.
Aleem, what do you think? You co-sign that?
Yeah. I see it being a sub 30 point win by the Chiefs. Yeah. That's what I see. Yeah.
Fair enough.
I can't.
All right, guys. What's that?
I can't get more precise than that in my predictions.
Fair enough. John was precise enough for the entire panel, I think. I think he got the analysis was spot on. At least I look, you convinced me, and I don't know shit about football, so
there you go.
All right, guys. Thanks as always, and thanks everybody for watching or listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave any comments or feedback in the comment section if you're watching this on YouTube.
All right.
Hashtag First Amendment.
Hashtag First Amendment.
Peace.
All right. Thanks, guys.